I'm going to give you a little background on how I started in the biz, and what it'll do is it'll give you an insight into how we developed this product and what its capabilities are. When I started out working in this business, I was taught in I suppose you could say an old school way that less is more. Really, you want to be invisible. You want to sound like you were never there. And when I say sound like you were never there is sound, and there's color, and there's flavor, and there's stuff that you do, but it should be felt in the body. The thought process should really be on that artist. I started out in 1991, so it wasn't that long ago, but I learned from an industry veteran who was one of the pioneers of the art, a guy named Doug Sachs. You know, the less is more concept really applied, because once you get that gain structure and that chain sorted out, it became about, you know, does this need a little bit of air, a little bit of 15K cracked open? Does it need a little bit of low end? And you really brought in these sensibilities, these gain structure responsibilities, along with a little bit of processing. So what's developed over the years in my career, 25 years in, we've seen, and in part we've been responsible for, you know, 10 equalizers, 3 compressors, you know, all kinds of stuff in the chain to create this maximum impact. And, you know, through various reasons, people have pushed everything. You know, I noticed that when CDs went into cars, compression became more popular, because dynamic range, which is a wonderful thing, became a problem. You're riding with your car window open, you got to push that verse up a little bit, because it sort of disappears with the sound of the wind and, you know, car horns and that sort of thing. So, you know, through various lifestyle, you know, things that we deal with, it sort of dictates how we process the stuff that we consume. So in talking about music, with compression becoming more popular and stuff like that, you know, now it's a mobile listening world. What we've done with this product, in terms of the starting gate, is we look back at years of trends of how it is we arrive at this point B in space, the deliverable that we give the clients. And we see consistencies. We see the way we patch equalizers and compressors and treat the gain structure. And you know, when each human being has their own kind of style and pursuit and way of doing something. And when you look at those consistencies, you can start to build that into something like this product. So it's kind of a revolutionary way of approaching this art. It's, if you were to equate it to a race car, it's giving you first and second gear out the gate, and then you'll bring yourself to figure out what third and fourth gear is. So it kind of puts you on a rail to start with. But really, the design of this, the concept of this, is to give you some confidence as to where to go to start with music. And part of the incentive of designing this product is to help you have some confidence to get out of that starting gate. You have to know who you are. You have to bring yourself into the equation once you're down the road, once you're on a certain rail, and use your ears and find that confidence. And you have to have context. You know, you have to have a good, decent monitoring system that you know. It doesn't have to actually be anything special. It just has to be something that's familiar. And you have to have some context. You know, what's your market? Who are you competing with? You don't have to make your song sound like anybody's. But you have to have some sense of where this market lies from a sonic point of view, how the music gets processed, and then also how the music gets played back on a consumer device. Because once you submit a digital file, that's not an audible thing. It has to be decoded in order to become something audible. So there is some, you know, responsibility to that process as well. You know, we give you first and second gear, you figure out your third and fourth gear, you take that race car over the line, but you know what track you're on. And that's kind of the way that I would use that as a metaphor to describe this. You know, I'm going to let Reuben demonstrate some features on this product here.
So I'm going to make some adjustments, and I'm going to show some of the features on the iPad, which is currently available, and you guys can follow along on screen. So I pulled up a song, Too Late, the contest winner, and the first thing we're going to do before doing anything else is just listen to how it sounds unprocessed. So you'll see that this toggle switch right here in and bypass in the middle with the red light on and off, we're just going to listen to it in bypass. And I'm also going to take the meter switch down to input so the VU meters show exactly what's happening before any processing at all. I'm going to click up here too to the waveform display so we can all follow along. And you'll notice that there's plenty of headroom on this mix as it comes in, so the VU meters are going to read pretty low. So here we go. I'm going to go to the meat of the song here.
I realize you're not mine, but you're pushing me apart.
So this is unprocessed, nothing at all. Cool. So, like Gavin was saying, we had the opportunity to come up with a setting for this song in a monitoring environment that we're familiar back at our studio. And what we did is this whole chain is modeled after the console that we work on day in, day out. So there's various easy-to-use, very intuitive presets depending on the arrangement that you're working on and the elements within the mix. So for this particular track, we found that the preset Pop, Rock, More Glue was a good go-to. And you'll see as soon as I clicked that, the tube limiter changed, and the configuration of how the parameters of the solid-state compressor all of a sudden changed. So that lit up. I'm going to show that one more time just so you guys get an idea. Going back to Americana Tight, which has more of a vintage tube limiter. And whenever you switch from preset to preset, the changes light up, so it's easy to see what's happening. So back to Pop, Rock, More Glue. So it uses more of a modern type of tube limiter, and it works a little bit harder, meaning that it's gluing together and compressing a little bit more. So right off the bat, you'll see right here down below a 5-band EQ, and the values automatically show up as 8, 10, 10, 8, meaning that you have all frequencies are boosted. And that does many things. That allows you to listen through an EQ already, and you're listening through the processing. And this is actually how we work day in, day out, working on albums at our studio. You're monitoring through the processing already and then making adjustments from there. So boosting all frequencies at once allows you to fine-tune listening through the EQ while it's already working. And the EQ, as you notice, has a reverse smile curve, kind of like an arc shape, which works in relation to the natural smile face curve of the compression that it's feeding. So the two work hand in hand to create a balance that is actually flat, a sort of flat, but with color, vibe, texture, and all the things that we can achieve in the mastering virtually. So you can do it, you know, in your DAW or in an iPad rather. So here we go. I'm going to press play, and I'm going to show you guys a real-life enactment of how we would go about doing this. So I'm going to, before I press play, actually, I'm going to switch it from bypass to input, and I'm going to switch the meters to monitor the processing itself. And here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually gain it up about 9 dB on the input drive, meaning the amount of gain inputting that's feeding the entire chain. And right away you can hear the compression working, and you can see the compressors lighting up. So everything is working. And this particular track, we felt that the vocal needed a little bit of support. So we created some support in the lower mids. I'm going to do that right here by giving it a little bit of juice around 120. I'm going to bring back the vocal a little bit. I'm going to support the vocal a little bit more by just bringing down 3K a little bit and then boosting 6K to make sure that it feels open. And this is the setting that we found worked for this song. So basically, it brings you, as Gavin was saying, it brings you to first and second gear, but third and fourth gear is something that's left to the user, and really puts you in the driver's seat. So there's going to be a big level jump here, but this is before. It's quite low, so maybe we give it a little bit of level on the PA just to hear an accurate, yeah. And then I'm going to hit after. Now you hear it all working. I'm going to switch to the waveform display again. Moving the playhead. Another important feature is being able to create loops, so you can zero on a particular section, so you can literally just move these loop parameters here on the timeline, click the loop feature and press play. And then in real time, you can actually adjust those parameters to tighten your loop or loosen it. So now, without having to stop and start, it's going to automatically loop here. You can also out-pinch and pinch to navigate to wherever you want in the song. I'm going to take off the loop feature for a second. Great. From here, I'm going to now go into automation, which is something that a lot of people have the misconception that mastering is just a one-setting type thing. It can be when needed, but working on records day in, day out, we're often riding EQs into compressors for certain sections of songs to create the desired end result.
When you talk about dynamic range, it's a wonderful thing. Nobody disputes that. But people fight us on dynamic range. They want more dynamic range, but oftentimes when they want more, what they're really saying is they want less. Because when you want a song to have a nice, swell into something, the other perception of that is it starts too low. So which do you want? You want it to start with full impact. I once had a conversation with Tom Waits, and he said, I want this, the way he described the way he wanted it to sound, he said, I want this to lend me money and pay me back. So that's really what people want. How do you do that? So we've thought about this, and what you can do is you can come up with perceived dynamic range. This is probably people turning over in their graves listening to this, but you can start with some impact, and you can ride your tune. You can start loud. You can come down a little bit. You can actually ride a little EQ into your choruses to give what sounds like dynamic range to the ear. And these are the responsibilities that we work with. And like I said before, and it's very important to sound like we were never there. So we had to digitize all of that stuff, all of these sentiments, all the stuff that resides in the heart. The place you work from when you deal with art and people's music. So we're mixing it with commerce too. You're making art and you're selling it. So, well, you're trying to sell it. So this is kind of the context of these areas of automation. There's one way you can use automation. There's other approaches.
Right now, what's available are automating two things: the input drive and also the push feature, which I haven't even talked about yet. The push feature will ride EQ, all bands relative to one another, currently, with this build. And you can, you see as I push it, all of the bands are gaining, or if I pull it back, all the bands are pulling back relative to one another. So the actual curve of the EQ is remaining, but it's saturating, depending on how you want to ride it. It's also important to use this push feature consciously as you're determining your input drive, because if you're pushing all bands, it's essentially saturating the tube EQ a little bit more. You're creating the tube EQ to work a little harder, whereas if you pull it back, you might gain a little more punch, but you might have to compensate with giving it a little more input drive, because the EQ itself will give you some level. So these are all things to consider. But going back to a good starting point, this basic preset will take you a lot of the way there, and you can fine-tune from that place. But what I really wanted to show you is how these two features can be automated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here on the lower right-hand part of the screen. I'm going to switch the automation from off to right. And I'm going to hit this plus sign on the waveform display. And you'll see that push is actually already highlighted. I can switch between input and output, meaning that we're going to write only, right now, the push feature. We're actually going to write automation in real time as the song goes down. So I'm going to hit play and we're ready to go. Give it a little bit more. Okay. So a chorus is about to come up here. Cool. So let's say I was happy with that performance, or if I wanted to make some adjustments, I could go in, you'll see as soon as I hit play, the automation automatically switched from read to touch, write to touch. So what I can do with touch is go in there and make fine-tune adjustments. I can use the pencil tool to adjust points here if I wanted to just fine-tune how we came from the chorus to the verse. So all of that is at your disposal. And now what we can do is listen back to what we did by going to read mode.
Open up my eyes and I see the one I love is you. I'm much too late. I'm much too late.
And let's say we weren't quite sure about that decision. We can go back to before the chorus and before the automation, go back to off mode, and we can listen to it without the automation. Some other features involve deciding if you want to have the same amount of gain feeding left to right. So you can unlink the channels and decide how much gain is on the left relative to the right if you're ever in that situation where you need it, which comes up now and again in mastering.
It does come up often because sometimes you want to do one channel at a time and do this effect so it doesn't sound like a dB step all of a sudden. You know, you can come up one side, come up another. It's an old school trick. I learned a lot of these type ththings from the original guys that really pioneered this world, you know, and it's all part of this.
Immediate presets that are available to you immediately, they come from so many albums that we've worked on day in, day out, all the trial and error, figuring out what type of arrangements work with certain presets. So if you go to hip-hop, for instance, going back to seeing the gain structure and the processes that are working all in as one whole, you'll notice that there's no tube limiter, and that's for the reason that a lot of times when you're working on hip-hop, there's 808s and claps, and if you use a tube limiter, for instance, on the pop rock setting, it could absorb those in a less musical way. You want to make sure to maintain all that punch and compress it in the right way to get impact and everything you want to achieve out of a more aggressive type of release without it feeling processed in a negative way. So these are all things that will allow you to get a good way of the way there. And then you can fine-tune. You'll notice that there are some parameters that you can affect, but a lot of them you can't, and that's for good reason, because developing this tool, we've decided to give you just enough ability to adjust where you want to adjust, but not lead yourself down a road that's going to actually take you away from where you want to go. And that just comes from doing this day in, day out, you know, on our console at our studio.
Can I add a little point? This feature here, you want to show it to them?
Oh, yeah.
It's a great feature, the little piece of console tape, which incidentally is still on the console. And that's a great way to keep your context. And it's all about context. Everything that we do is about working within a context. And you know, this is a little feature that helps you come back to, you never lose your place.
Yeah, so we're so happy to
On the other side too.
to partner with IK because they took so much care and we worked so closely with them to really understand the finesse that comes into the process of mastering. And they even went so far as to model our tape mark that we have on our console. It's still there. Now it's become immortalized, where you can use a visual representation of where you want to monitor. So they've incorporated that here. And on here, there's grease pencil marks that are that you can move however you'd like, just to give yourself a visual representation. They are in dB step amounts. This makeup gain at the very end of the chain, underneath the solid-state compressor, is essentially your output level. There is, under the hood, there's a whole lot of processing that's happening that is part of the sound. But in terms of what the user can control, it's the last part of the chain to set the overall output level. Now, that's used not only to make it louder or quieter, but also to determine how hard the chain is working in terms of how hard the compressors are working within the chain. For instance, if you go to pop rock, you'll see that the tube limiter is back in there. If I were to hypothetically lower the makeup gain a little bit and to compensate for that level decrease, raise the input gain, it means the whole entire chain is working harder at that point on the track. Compressors are squeezing more. But if I were to do the opposite, back off the input level, and to compensate for that, raise the makeup gain, it's going to fine-tune how all the transients are moving through the virtual chain. So those small little things are going to influence how the end result sounds. And to compensate, once you hear those differences, it could be that releasing that squeeze, if you will, creates certain things in the track to be brought out, like claps. So you might want to then, you know, bring down 6K a little bit just to tuck that in, and that will introduce a whole different type of feel overall. So all these things are important. Now let's say you're happy with all your settings on the board, on the virtual board here. You can save the settings on the preset menu by hitting this plus sign. You can name it whatever you want. And that's really important because you can go to another song and load up that preset, and then you won't have to actually manually recall all your settings. You can have a quick go-to. Because so many times when we're working on records, we're working on albums that perhaps were tracked in the same environment, same musicians in the same room. You know, all the songs need to get their own special attention, but you already want to start monitoring through the process that you have already found for that first song. So you can jump right to that and stay in that sonic world, if you will, without losing your perspective by having to recreate that. So that's a really important thing, and these are all things that we experience day in, day out in the studio.
We got a question from an old pal. The question is, what are the exporting options? This, by the way, is Mike Piersante, who's a very seasoned veteran recording, mixing engineer, producer, responsible for some amazing records. I won't embarrass him any further than that, but he's a big deal. And he wants to know how to export this stuff, so it's a good sign.
Yes, and I'm really glad you brought that up because that was the last thing that I was actually going to go over. Up here, this tab, now we got a big export window. You can either export just the song you're working on, or let's say you're done with your project, you got 12 songs in an album, you can export all the songs at once to whatever codec you want, be it WAV, FLAC, AAC, what have you, at whatever sample rate and bit depth you want too, which is important because if you're working on a track at 44.1 and you want to export it to 48K for video, you can go through a sample rate conversion on export. And then you can export it, for instance, if I click more right here, actually I think it's going to go through the process of exporting, but what you can do is you can send it an email, you can send it in if you're on the iPad, you can send it on a message, an iMessage, all that stuff. So it's quick to use. Another cool feature that I didn't want to forget is with this, if it's on the iPad, if you're using this program on the iPad, this software, you can literally take it into any environment on the fly. You can bring this into your car, make fine-tune adjustments in the car because everybody listens in the car. It's another familiar environment for everybody. It's where most people listen to music. And you can play with your mix and monitor in that environment, then bring it back to the studio and make fine-tune adjustments there. You can bring it to a nightclub and put it up on the PA system, see how it's going to translate there. So it really brings the user out of the studio and introduces a really easy-to-use feature to monitor in any environment, which is really special.
You know, if you're doing live gigs, you can have somebody tweak your live performance as it's going down, release it to your fans on the way out the hall. You can be at Coachella, be doing this. You can be a DJ flying from city to city, putting together your compilations for each gig each night, and do it on the iPad on the go. There's so many new ways to think about these products that haven't even been thought of yet, you know. Working with IK has been a wonderful thing. These guys completely understood the way we work, and we essentially digitized what we do, and it's been a joy working with these guys. We're very proud of this product. It's a great representation of the work that we do. That's all we have. Thank you for listening to everything. If there's any other questions, we're around. Thanks for coming, and enjoy the product.